You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
So we've got on the line today Dr. Maximillian Alvarez. He is the host of the Working People podcast and editor-in-chief of the Real News Network. He's very busy, so Dr. Max, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Of course, brothers. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, David reminded me that you had successfully defended your dissertation. I had forgotten all about that. So that's got to feel really nice.
It does. I mean, it's weird to kind of think back of all that's happened this year in pandemic conditions. But I've been, technically out of graduate school for a number of years, but I hadn't ever really fully finished my dissertation to get my doctorate, because I started working out here in the DC and Baltimore area. And so the clock, finally ran out, and I had to either meet that deadline or not get that piece of paper. And so thankfully, this past summer, while juggling the podcast and my full-time job and living through a pandemic, I managed to get my doctorate. So thanks, guys.
Absolutely. That's really cool. What was your dissertation on, if you don't mind? Well, you said you said that you weren't going to be releasing it publicly, so never mind. You don't have to answer that.
No, I can tell you. I mean, it's relevant. I just don't want to, I don't have any plans to publish it because it's more of one of those things that I think there's value in it, but I mean, it was very much written for academics. And so It would take a lot of time to turn it into what I want it to be. Right. And I'm still too scarred from the experience to want to think about that now. So maybe sometime down the road, but I mean, it's related to kind of what we're doing here. Right. So I studied, the relationship between media and radical politics in early 20th century Mexico. I looked at kind of anarchist Mexican political groups and communist Mexican political groups on either side of the Mexican Revolution, and wanted to think about not just how they used the media that was available to them at the time, right? Newspapers and, distributing those newspapers through the post office and yada, yada, yada. But how the changes in the media technologies of the 20th century actually shaped the ways that they organized, right? And shaped the ways that they thought they could achieve their political goals and the things that they did with media. So, I think it's relevant to what we're doing here. So, but it's basically in a nutshell, the relationship between media and how we use it and how that affects kind of the ways that we engage in politics.
It's interesting that you would say you don't want to release it, because I know a redneck from Alabama that has read as much as I could ever read on Zapatistas, and that's something that sounds like it would be right up my alley as far as learning, what was going on down there on the radical left in Mexico. I love those folks. I mean, I absolutely love those folks.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if maybe one or two people caught this Easter egg, but when you guys did your fabulous interview with Dr. Robin Kelly, I was in the live chat, and I actually asked him a question about we're talking about how a lot of, black, kind of communists in the South were reading stuff about the Soviet Union. I was like, I'm curious to know, how much of them were reading about the Mexican Revolution, which, as we know, preceded the Bolshevik Revolution. And he gave a really, really interesting answer there. But I think you're absolutely right, David. There's a lot of really interesting kind of history there. And the Zapatistas were going to be a full chapter in the original dissertation. For folks who are listening, you may remember the Zapatistas were the kind of indigenous group that emerged from the jungle to reject the 1994 kind of North American Free Trade Agreement because of everything that it meant for them and the land that they lived on. And they're still going strong today. But David, I think you would really be interested in the second chapter of this dissertation, which is on the radical liberal turned anarchist Ricardo Flores Magon, and his newspaper Regeneración, which was made in the United States while these radicals were in exile and trying to kind of get the people ready for a revolution across the border in Mexico with this newspaper. So it was really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and the pushback on neoliberalism. I mean, and the fact that, you know, we hear so much, and especially in the South, but Trump has turned it basically nationwide and unfortunately worldwide with Brexit. You know, the immigrants that are coming here, but that are basically being forced here by neoliberalism because of our U.S. political legislation and fascist intertwinement with corporations, and those folks down there didn't want it. They didn't want anything to do with it. But yet, you know, all of our folks blame these people for coming here when really they're to the point where they have no choice, with the exception of like what the Zapatistas have done, and basically created their own social, you know, their own society there, to where they take care of themselves and the mutual aid between each other. It's a beautiful thing. It's unfortunate that it came about the way it came about, but it's a beautiful thing to see now.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, and for anyone listening, like, the deeper you dig into this history, the clearer what David said becomes. The clearer the things that David said become, right? Because you know, you're talking about, David, that like the kind of, like we have consistent waves of migration that are caused by, you know, neoliberal policies imposed, and neoliberal forms of economics and politics that are imposed on countries in the global South by countries like the U.S. that create kind of the economic and political conditions that drive people away from their homes to seek, you know, the ability to make a livelihood in the United States. So it's very much a feedback loop. And the thing that I just wanted to throw in here before we move on is that this has been going on for a long time, right? If you go back to the time of the Mexican Revolution, over a century ago, right? It was like, you know, more or less ended like right around a century ago from where we are now. You had a bunch of powerful American political and business interests who were trying to push the revolution to go a certain way, who were trying to get certain leaders to take control because they would prioritize securing like American interests, right? Because what they were worried about, they didn't care about democracy for the people. They didn't care about the people not having to live under a brutal dictator in Porfirio Diaz. They only cared about, are we going to be able to keep our claims on like these mines, right? Or are we going to be able to hold these gas reserve or oil reserves, right? And so that's all that we've ever cared about in this country, and we have imposed our will on so many other countries, and we should not be surprised when the result of that is people fleeing those countries coming here, because that's the only option that we have left them with.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely important for folks to recognize that the push factor is much greater than the pull factor. Like, people aren't coming here because they're like they're enamored with like the prospects of America. They're being pushed out by oftentimes American foreign policy and things like that. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments and release them throughout the week. We do upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps, so to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website where you can buy our hat, thevalleylaborreport.org. You can also get some stickers there as well. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. As you can tell, if you're watching the screen, the stream, we've got we've got a messed up monitor, so we're gonna be either having to pay for a repair for that, or I mean, it's my fault, so I'm going to be paying for at least some of it out of my pocket, and maybe some out of the show funds. But gonna have to pay to repair that or get a new one, which is a bummer. But anyway.